So jQuery is a JavaScript library, and in next few videos we are going to be touching up on the concepts of jQuery, because I thought that we should include this topic in this JavaScript for Beginners playlist, because the plain vanilla JavaScript, that is what we've been learning for so far, is not really used a lot when it comes to real world scenarios, So when you're dealing with the plain JavaScript, you need to write a lot of code to achieve basic functionalities, and jQuery is a framework, or you can say it's a library built on top of JavaScript, which enables us to write less and do more, which means that you can do things that takes lot of line of code in JavaScript, and you can do that same thing in single line or couple of lines in jQuery. So quick disclaimer, we are not going to be covering everything in jQuery, because jQuery itself can take around 50 to 60 videos and it can be separate playlist itself. But yes, I thought that we should be covering this jQuery because this will give you a sense of how JavaScript is actually being used in real world scenarios, and jQuery is a widely used JavaScript library. So with that being said, let's just take a little bit of introduction and then we'll set things up. We'll download the jQuery library onto our system and include it in our project folder. Okay, so what is jQuery? So jQuery is a fast, small and feature-rich JavaScript library. So don't confuse yourself with jQuery being a completely separate framework or some new technology. It is basically just a library which is pre-compiled by some developers, and it is open source, and it has a lot of JavaScript code which will ease our work so that we can write less and do more. So the purpose of jQuery is to make it much easier to use JavaScript on your website, and it gives us a feature of write less and do more. So that's the basic concept of jQuery, and it is one of the most widely used JavaScript libraries. It's a pretty old library, but it is still being used by a lot of developers. One of the best features is it is cross-browser compatible, which means that it is pretty much working on every modern browser exactly the same. And it is also open source and free to use. Okay, so there's a huge community which contributes and updates this jQuery library from time to time, so we get different versions from over the course of time. And moving ahead, jQuery takes a lot of common tasks that require many lines of JavaScript code to accomplish and wraps them into methods so that you can call them with a single line of code. So as I mentioned, it is used to help us ease our task. So the code that takes like 10 to 15 or maybe even 50 lines of code can be done in one single line, and I'll give you a short example in this video at the end also. And jQuery also simplifies a lot of complicated things from JavaScript like AJAX calls and DOM manipulations. So the primary features that jQuery library contains are HTML DOM manipulations. So we've been doing the document object model manipulations from JavaScript also using the document.getElementById, right? So we used to access the HTML elements and perform operations on it. So jQuery also helps us do that, but it is done in a very much simpler way by using directly methods. Then we have CSS manipulations, we have HTML events. So events are handled a little bit differently in jQuery. We have the same set of events, but they are handled differently. We have many effects and animations which can be done in single line of code, and that's the example that I'm going to show you today. Then we have AJAX, which is asynchronous JavaScript and XML. Then we have different utilities, and on top of jQuery we have jQuery UI and some other technologies as well, which we can touch up in the end of this video series. But this was just a little bit of theory on jQuery. Let's move on to the actual practical implementation on how to include this jQuery into our project, because that will give you a real sense of what exactly is jQuery in terms of the practical scenario. Okay, so this is just the theory and you'll be like, okay, let's actually see jQuery in action, right? So let's do that. So open up your browser and go to this website jQuery.com. This is the official website, and you can see a lot of things, documentations, blog, plugin. We need to just use this. You can read through the articles. So jQuery is a fast, small, feature-rich JavaScript library, so on and so forth, and a lot of things which are related to that. But right now let's just concentrate on using this jQuery into our project folder. So just click on this download jQuery button. So as of now we are on version 3. Earlier we had version 1.x, 2.x, and now we are on version 3. Maybe if you are watching this video in future or sometime ahead in time, we'll have some new version, but it will pretty much support the older versions as well. So just click on download jQuery, and here you'll have different options. We have download the compressed production jQuery, we have download uncompressed development jQuery, and then we have slim build. So this slim build is where some features are removed, which excludes the AJAX and effects modules, but we are going to be using the uncompressed development jQuery because we are in development scenario. When it comes to production, the production version is slightly smaller in size, that is the file size is smaller. So let's click on this download uncompressed one. And once you click on this, you can see that there is this entire JS document which is loaded, and this is the entire jQuery library or jQuery code which is being typed by, as I mentioned, some developers for us, and we can directly use them. So just right click on it and click on save as. Now go to your project code folder and create a folder inside this create a JS folder and images folder. Let's keep things organized over here. I'm gonna go into the JS folder. You can see I have already saved this, and what I did is I just changed the name from jQuery -3.3.1 to something easy. So I saved it as jQuery, and the type has to be JavaScript file because it is basically a JavaScript library. Once you save it, go to your folder. So this is my folder, inside which I have the code, wherein I have the default.html page. Then I have the JavaScript folder, and inside that I have this library. Okay. Now let's come back to the Visual Studio Code. Open your Visual Studio Code and open your code folder inside it. And here's where we have to include the jQuery, right? So what we'll do is we'll include the jQuery at the bottom of the HTML document because it takes some time to load this JavaScript into our HTML document. So it is always preferred to include JavaScript at the bottom after the entire HTML document has been rendered. So use the script tag, source attribute. We have to go to the JS folder, and inside that we have to say jQuery.js. Okay. So this one line of code will include the entire JavaScript library into your HTML document, and now you can perform some jQuery operations. So I'm just going to show you a quick demonstration of how jQuery can be used to animate things. So what we'll do is we'll give this h2 tag an ID. I'm going to say heading 1. Let's say heading 1. Below the script tag we'll start one more script tag, and inside that we will include our jQuery code. Now we've included the jQuery library at this line, so our jQuery code should be below that. So again, opening a new script tag, and inside that we'll write the jQuery code. Right now you don't need to worry about the syntax of this code, just follow along with me. I'm just gonna include a button over here. I'm gonna give it an ID of btn1. I'm gonna say click me, and right now let's use the JavaScript way of calling events, that is the click event. So I'm gonna say on click. I'm gonna call a function, let's say fn1. Okay, so you have to create that function, so let's do that in the script tag. So I'm gonna say function fn1, but inside this function we are gonna be using the jQuery style syntax. Okay, and what we are gonna do is on the click of this button we are going to fade out this entire heading 2. So let me go to the code, and this is where, let me just zoom in a little bit. In fact, I'll just set it besides the code. Okay, so let me just first call an alert over here just to see if everything is working. When I click on this, okay, so our pop-up is coming, which means our JavaScript is working. So on this function call, we have to fade out this entire h2 tag. Now, if you've been following this entire JavaScript playlist, in the previous couple of videos, we saw the animations using plain JavaScript, right? And you remember that we had to first access the entire element, we had to access the opacity, then we had to reduce it, and we had to recursively call the function using the set interval method. But in this case, using jQuery, it will be all very simplified, and we'll just need one line of code. So here's how you do it. So I'm gonna say $, which is basically calling the jQuery library, and it's a selector function, and we'll talk about this as we move ahead. Right now just follow along. I'm just gonna pass the ID using the hash, because IDs are referenced by hash and class is referenced by dot in CSS. I'm gonna say dot, I'm gonna say fade toggle, and that's about it. Okay, so this is one single line of code which is gonna perform fade in and fade out, because this fade toggle function does fade in or fade out depending upon what the situation is. So if it is already there, that is if the heading tag is visible, it will fade out. If it is invisible, it will fade in. So that's what fade toggle does. Let's try to click this, and there you go, you can see it got faded out. If I click it again, it will come back. In fact, you can also give the milliseconds. So I'm gonna say 2000. If I click on it, it will take 2 seconds to fade out. If I click on it, it will take 2 seconds to come back. And this is the power of jQuery. Using one single line of code, we did something which we had to write like at least 15 lines of code, right, for the fade in and fade out. If you remember the code from the JavaScript, we had to write a lot of code. So this is just the tip of the iceberg. There is so much that you can do in jQuery that it is actually used in real world scenarios a lot. And we'll also brush through a lot of things on jQuery so that you'll be capable enough to experiment yourself and do a lot of things more after learning this. So yeah, this was just an introduction, just the setting up of jQuery, what exactly is jQuery and how to include it in your project file. Now there is another way in which you can include jQuery, and that is by using the content delivery network system. So right now what we did is we came to this website jQuery.com and we click on the download button and we downloaded the code onto our system, right? So there is another way in which you can do this, and it is by using a content delivery network. Okay, so if you scroll down on this same page, that is the download page, just go on jquery.com, click on download, and if you scroll down you can see that there is a concept of using jQuery with a CDN. So what a CDN is? CDN in very basic terms is basically a server which is there on the internet. Okay, so it's accessible via the internet, and this jQuery library is stored onto that server. So instead of that jQuery library onto your system, that is downloading it offline onto your system, what you do is you access that server, and that server ID is given, that is the entire web address is given by this CDN. So if you just click on this CDNs, you'll understand what exactly content delivery network is and what it does. But to use the jQuery CDN, you can see this link, https://code.jquery.com. Just click on it, and this is where you can see all the CDNs, that is the link to the CDN. Just select the uncompressed one, that is the jQuery core, click on it, and you can see that this link is provided. Just copy this entire thing, come to your code and paste it over here. And now if you comment this out, even then jQuery will be included into your folder, provided that you have internet connection. Right now the jQuery library is being located at this location. So if you just copy this and go to your browser and paste it, you'll see that the entire jQuery library is over here online. So what you're doing is you're accessing this entire jQuery library online, and this will only work if you have internet, obviously. And then this integrity is something which is related to security stuff. You don't have to bother about it. So this is another way in which you can use this jQuery library, and even now the code will work. You can see we got fade out effect. Let me just reduce this. If I click on it, we get fade out. If you click on it, we get fade in, which means that jQuery is still being used into our system because it is being accessed over the internet. So this is another way. Okay, so we'll go through the offline way, that is we'll download the jQuery onto our system, because that is the basic way. When you are actually hosting your website onto a server, when you are making things live, generally CDNs are preferred because the CDN servers are very fast compared to our servers. Okay, so that's why depending on those CDNs is much more safer and much more smarter way of using jQuery or any other libraries. So as you can see, into my project folder I already have my jQuery in the JS folder. So let me just show you. So in the code part I have our default.html document. Then in the JS folder we have the jQuery library which we downloaded from the jQuery.com website. I'll drop the link in the video description. And then I have also created a CSS folder inside which I have a style.css file which we will be linking in this video. So what you can do is you can just create these folders and create these files. So just right click on this and create new file, create a style.css, because we'll write the CSS separate. We'll try to make this clean because we are going to be continuing and using this same document in the further videos of jQuery as well. And lastly, as you can see, we have our HTML document. We have the head, inside which just we have the title of jQuery selectors. We have the body, we have a heading tag, we have a button, and we are using the onClick event to call function fn1. And below the body we have a script tag which includes the jQuery into our project, into our HTML document. And below that we have one more script tag in which we are going to be writing our function fn1. Okay, so let's start off with understanding what is jQuery selectors. Now jQuery selectors allow you to select and manipulate HTML elements. Now just as we were manipulating HTML DOM elements using JavaScript, using the document.getElementById or getElementByClass or getElementByName and all those methods, in jQuery the way we manipulate HTML elements is using the selectors. Okay, now these selectors are used to find or select HTML elements based on their name, ID, class, type, attributes, values, and a lot more, wherein we have a different variations in jQuery selectors. So there is a lot of flexibility compared to what we have in JavaScript. So it's based on the existing CSS selectors that we did in JavaScript, and in addition it has some own custom selectors. Okay, so up until now if things are a little confusing, don't worry. Once we write the code you'll understand it very well. So in this video we'll see 3 different selectors, that is the 3 basic CSS selectors, and in further videos we'll continue with more selectors in jQuery which are specific to jQuery. But with that being said, let's start off with the coding part so that you understand what these selectors are and how they look in terms of the syntax. So let's actually check the function fn1 if it's working. Let's just pop up an alert. We'll say working, and let me click on the button, and there you go, it is working. Okay, so now here is where we have to use the selectors. So the syntax of the selectors is as follows. You have to write $, opening and closing round brackets, and inside this double quotes or single quotes, you have to specify which selector you're going to be using. Okay, so depending upon what selector you're using, the element or the ID of the element or the class of the element can be accessed, and then that particular element can be accessed. So just to give you an example, if I want to access this h2 element, so we have this h2 tag, so I'm going to write h2 over here, plain and simple. So this is the first part. However, this is a little bit of incomplete part because we still have to specify something that we have to do onto that element, right? By writing this much, what you did is the JavaScript equivalent of this would be document dot get element by ID. Okay, so by using $, you are actually basically calling the jQuery library. So that's the syntax, and the thing that you specify in the opening and closing round brackets in the double quotes or single quotes is what is going to be selected. So after the selection, you have to perform something, right? So typically we have something along with the selection, that is the action, and the action is basically a method. Okay, so whenever you select an object, that is the HTML element, you are going to be performing some action onto it. Let's say you're performing CSS transitions, let's say you're performing some color changes, let's say you want to hide or fade in and fade out. So that is the action. Okay, so we have predefined functions in jQuery, as I mentioned, functions and methods which we are going to be using a lot, and then we are directly going to be using them over here. So this is how the typical syntax goes. Let me just show you how you can actually fade out this entire text over here. So we are going to be selecting the h2 tag, right? So I'm going to say $, opening and closing round brackets, in the double quotes I'm going to say h2 because we are directly going to be selecting h2. I'm going to say dot, and I'm going to say fade toggle. Okay, so this is an inbuilt method which performs fade in and fade out depending upon what the situation is. So right now, since it is visible, it will fade out. If it is invisible, it will fade in. Okay, so let's see if this works. So if I click on it, there you go, it faded out. If I click on it, it will come back in. So this one line of code is something that we saw in the previous video also. However, we did not take a deep understanding of what exactly is the syntax about. So this first part is the selector, as I mentioned, and the next part is always going to be some action which we are going to be performing on that element. Now this was the first type of selector, which was the entire element selector. Okay, so let's say if we had multiple h2 tags. Okay, so if I click on it, all of them are going to be selected and all of them are going to be hidden. So there you go, you can see all of them got faded out and all of them can come back in also depending upon the function being called. So now what if you want to select only one out of the three, right? So this is where another CSS selector can be used. So you have to give ID for that case, and let's say we give ID as first h2. Okay, so I'm going to say first h2. Now if I want to just fade out this one, so what I can do is I can use the ID selector. Now in CSS, remember, when we want to perform or manipulate or apply CSS styling to a particular HTML element with ID, what we do is we say hash, we say the name of the ID, and then we perform the actual styling, right? So let's say I want to change the color. Let's say I want to make it blue. Now right now you can see that it is not applying because we still have to include this CSS file into our HTML document, right? So that has to be done in the heading tag, or you can also do it at the bottom, but we'll do it in the heading tag, and that is done by using the link tag. So I'm going to say link, I'm going to say rel, that is the relation is style sheet, and then I'm going to say href. So href is actually giving the location of the CSS file. So it's inside the CSS folder, and inside that we have style.css. So now you can see immediately the style got applied, which we had typed in the style.css file. So this only applied to the first h2 tag because we've given the ID of first h2 to only this h2 tag. Okay, and you know that the ID has to be unique, so you cannot use this first h2 to the second heading tag, or you cannot use this entire ID on the entire document. So you can also have a class. So let's say class my heading. Now this class can be applied to all the different h2 tags. So let's say we apply this to first two heading tags. Okay, now let's say you want to just hide this one h2 tag. So what you can do is you can copy this ID, you can paste it over here, and you have to use a hash. Okay, so to actually access the IDs, we have to use the hash and then the ID name. So now if I click on it, only the first one is going to be hidden. If I click back, it's coming back. Okay, now let's say you want to perform this fade out and fade toggle on these two. So you can access them by using the class selector. So what we'll do is we'll copy this my heading and paste it over here, and classes are accessed by using the dot operator. So this dot operator is supposed to be used with the classes, and now the first two will be hidden and the last one will be visible. So if I click on it, there you go. If I click back, they come back. So these are the three different basic CSS selectors in jQuery. The first one was the entire element selector, which was selecting all the h2 tags together. The second one was the ID selector, which was selecting an element with a particular specific ID. So unique ID had to be given. And then the third one was the class selector, which was selecting all the elements having the particular ID. So this is not confined to one particular element. Let's say we have a division. So let me just say division class, and I give this class name also my heading, and inside that we have a paragraph. So I'm going to say this is para, and you can see this division is added over here. This division also has the class of my heading. So now if I click on this, even this entire division will be hidden, so the paragraph inside this will also be faded out. So let's click on it. So there you go, you can see the entire division was faded out, so that's why the paragraph also got faded out. So this is how the selectors work, and these are the very basic ones which are also there in JavaScript. We could do this in JavaScript also, but then jQuery also has some extra selectors. So we'll see few more selectors in jQuery, and if you don't know what selectors are, basically they are just inbuilt jQuery functions used to select the elements, that is the DOM elements, and then perform some action on it. Okay, so that is the very basics of selectors. So with that being said, as you can see, this is something that we did in the last program also. So what we were doing is we gave the ID of the first h2 tag as first h2, and when we click on the button, on the on click, we are calling this fn1, and this function is over here which we've written. Here we are using the ID selector using the hash inside the dollar function. So this is the syntax. So this is basically selecting that element with the ID of first h2. So the h2 element is going to be selected, and then after that we want to perform some action on it, and that action is a fade toggle method which will basically fade the text, that is it will fade it out, or if it is invisible it will fade it back in. Okay, so this will happen on click because fn1 is called on click. So let's click on it, and you can see it is faded out. So this was a quick recap of what we did in the previous video. Now in this video we'll see a few more different types of selectors, so that you understand that there are so many more things that you can do in jQuery. So let's first add a few HTML elements. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to erase this out. I'll keep the selectors h2. I'll add two more divisions. So I'll name this my divs. Okay, and I'll give this first division an ID of first div. Okay, similarly for the second one I'm gonna give second div, and for the third division I'm gonna give third div. So the class of all these three divisions is the same, and inside that we have a paragraph. So I'm gonna write this is first paragraph in first division. Okay, I'm gonna copy this and I'm gonna paste it inside the first division. So I'm gonna say this is second paragraph in first division. So just follow along. I'm adding some more HTML elements so that we can then manipulate them in different ways. In the second division I'm gonna say this is third para in second division, and in the third division what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add an unordered list. So I'm gonna say ul. Inside that I'm gonna say li list item 1. Okay, 2, 3 and 4. Now what we'll do is let's just add a little bit of margin and little bit of border to these different divisions. So each of these divisions have this class of my divs. So in our CSS file, by the way, we have a separate CSS file which is inside the CSS folder. So let me just show you the folder hierarchy that we've created in the previous video. So we have a CSS folder inside which we have style.css. We have a JS folder inside which we have the jQuery library. So we are including both of them in our code. So we are including CSS over here and we have jQuery over here at the bottom. So inside this style.css, we already have given the first h2 a color, but right now it's not there. So let's just erase this. I'm going to say dot my divs. Inside that I'm gonna say border colon 2 pixel solid. Let's give it a color of blue. So there you go, you can see that we've got a color of border to all the 3 different divisions. Let's add some margin. So I'm gonna say margin 5 pixel. So they are separated now. And let's add some padding as well, just to make it look better. I'm gonna say 10 pixel. Okay, so these are the 3 divisions. So now let's move on with the selector part. Now what if you want to perform fade toggle or perform some operation on multiple HTML elements? Okay, so let's say you want to hide this division and this division both at the time, but you don't want to hide this division. So if you just use the element selector, that is directly if you type div, all the 3 of them are gonna be fading out, right? So if I click on it, you can see all of them got faded. But what we want to do is we just want to fade the first 2 ones. Okay, so the first 2 divisions are supposed to be faded out. So you cannot use the class selector also. You cannot say dot my divs because all of them have the same class. But you can see that each of them have unique IDs, right? So instead of giving one ID, that is hash first div, I can add a comma and I can also add another ID over here. I can say hash second div. So in this case, what this selector is going to do is it is going to select multiple elements with these 2 different IDs and it is going to hide, that is fade this one and this one. So if I click on this, you can see only the first 2 divisions got hidden. So this is something that you can do. And now what you can do is you can also add other things. So let's say if I want to add paragraphs to this, that is I want to hide all the paragraphs also. So let's say I want to hide the first division with the ID of first div. So entire this division will be hidden. So all the paragraphs inside this will also be hidden. And I also want to hide the paragraph inside the second division. Okay, that is this paragraph. So coming to the selector function, if I say first div comma p and if I click on this, you can see that the first division got completely hidden and the paragraph inside the second division got completely hidden. Because we did not pass the division ID of the second division, we only passed the paragraph, right? So all the paragraphs also got hidden. Let's say you want to hide all the list elements, that is the li elements. So if I click on it, all the li elements in the third division will also be hidden. So this is how you can pass multiple things over here. You can also pass classes. So if I say comma dot my divs, pretty much everything will be hidden over here because everything is inside my divs. So let's say we have one more division which does not have this class, okay, nor does it have any ID. So only that division will be staying over here. If I click on this, everything is hidden because we also passed the li. So let me just erase the li. And now if I click on it, only the list items in the last division are visible because the last division did not get hidden. It was not accessed in this selector. Okay, so one more thing that we can do, one more variation that you can do is, what if you want to hide paragraphs which are directly inside a division? Okay, so let's say we have 2 paragraphs which are not inside any division. Okay, so here what you can see is there are first 2 paragraphs. So let me just rename it. So I'm gonna say this is a paragraph outside division. Okay, so this paragraph is not enclosed inside any division, whereas these 2 paragraphs and this paragraph is inside a division, right? That is, the parent element is division and the child is the paragraph. So what if you want to hide only that paragraphs which are inside a division? Even that can be done, and in that case you have to pass the parent element, that is div. You have to say greater than sign and you have to pass the child element. So in this case, this and this will be hidden and this will be hidden. So let's click on it and there you go. You can see the division did not get hidden. Only the paragraph inside that division got hidden because you can see the borders of the division are still there, right? So this is how you do it. Now even if you don't give the greater than sign, it works pretty much the same. If I just erase this greater than sign and if I say division space p and if I click on it, it will still work because that's how the CSS styling also works, right? So in the styles, if I say division space p, what it means that all the paragraphs which are inside division should have a color of red. So now if you see, all the paragraphs which are only inside the division are getting the color of red, and the paragraph which is outside does not have that color, right? Which means that the way we actually write the styles are the exact ways that we access it in the selectors. Okay, so what next? What all things can we do more? Now let's say you want to access the very first paragraph only. Okay, so typically on a website you have multiple things. So you have multiple divisions, multiple heading tags, multiple paragraph, and a lot of elements, right? So let's say you just want to hide the very first paragraph. So in that case, in the selector, what you do is you say P, you give a colon, and you type in first. So this will hide only the first instance of a paragraph element. So if I click on it, you can see only the first element got hidden. That is the first paragraph. Now the same thing applies to classes also. So you can see we have 3 divisions with the same class of myDiv. That is myDivs, myDivs, myDivs. What if you want to hide the first division which has the class of myDivs? So you can do that by using .mydivs over here. Again colon and first. It will hide the first division. If I click on the button, you can see the first division got faded out. One more thing you can do is, let's say you want to hide the even elements. Okay, so what you can do is, instead of this first, you can just type in even. Now the even numbering starts from 0. So this is the 0th division with class of myDivs. This is the first division and this is the second. So the 0th and the second division should be hidden, right? So let's see if this works. If I click on it, you can see it got hidden. If I click it back, it will get visible again. Let's try this with list items. So I'm gonna say li, all the list items which are even should be fade toggled or should be hidden or shown according to what they are currently. Okay, so here you can see this is at 0th position, this is at first, second and third. So 0th position and second position list items should be hidden. Again, since we are targeting li, all the li, that is all the list items on the document whose ordering is even, should be hidden. So again, this should apply to this list item and this list item also. So if I click on the button, you can see 2 list items got hidden which were at even position. Similarly, you can go ahead with odd also. So the list items or anything that is selected over here, the odd instances will be hidden, or whatever action you are performing. So this is not just about hiding or showing something or animating. So anything you can apply onto these selectors. Okay, so right now we are just using the fade toggle function just for demonstration purpose, but pretty much everything that methods do on these elements can be applied. So when we see different methods, when we move ahead in the series, we'll understand how to go about that, because we still have to cover events and methods. Right now we're just talking about selectors. So seeing the odd thing in action, you can see odd elements got hidden out. Okay, so this was a few more jQuery selectors and few more variations and flexible options that you can do in jQuery. Now I still haven't covered a lot of those selectors because there are n number of selectors which are not highly used. These are the most common ones. So in this video tutorial, we're going to be talking briefly about events in jQuery and how they are a little bit different compared to JavaScript. So if you've watched this entire series of beginners for JavaScript, you definitely must have understood what is events, because we went through different events in JavaScript like click event, then we had on mouse over, on mouse exit, and so on. So we had different events in JavaScript which we've seen in this entire series. But in jQuery, what happens is the events are handled differently. Now we have the same set of events in jQuery also. However, the way they work or the way they are accessed in the code is slightly different. So let's see how events work in jQuery, and we are using the same code from the previous video, that is the selectors video. So if you've not watched that, do watch that, because the code is exactly the same from that previous video. If not, you can just pause this video and you can just type it out. It is basic HTML, so this is the entire code. Okay, so you can just pause the video, just type it out. Okay, so in the previous video, what we were doing is, on the on-click event of the button, we were calling a custom function fn1, which we were defining in the script tag. So this is the function fn1, and we were using the selector and we were performing fade toggle function. So here the division which is having an ID of first div, which is this division, that is the first division, was faded on the click event. Okay, so if I click on this, we are fading it out. If I click it back, we are fading back in. Okay, so this is something that we were doing in the previous couple of videos. And now here you can see that we are using the on click event of the button. So in JavaScript also we've been doing this on click event, but in jQuery what happens is we do not handle the click event in the HTML itself. Okay, so what we do is we handle the event separately in JavaScript code. So the way we use jQuery events is we don't define it over here. So what we do is we do that in the script tag itself. So in the script tag, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say $, and inside the selector function, what I'm going to say is I'm going to pass the button. Okay. So this is the element selector, right? So what I'm going to say is $button, and I'm going to say .click. So this click method is an inbuilt method, and basically it is equivalent to the onClick event, which we were writing it over here in JavaScript, right? So this is that same equivalent method which works exactly the same. Now opening and closing round brackets because it is a method and a semicolon, but on click something should happen, right? So that's something we have to define it inside here. And whenever we want to define an action, what we do is we create a function, right? So I'm gonna write function, opening and closing round brackets of the function, opening and closing curly brackets of the function for the body, and I'm gonna hit enter. So this syntax is looking a little bit weird because what we did is we called a method, and inside that we created a function without a name, right? So this is an anonymous function which only exists inside this click method. Okay. Now what you could have done is you could have created another function, also separate function. Let's say this is the fn1, right? So if I can copy this and if I can paste it over here, even this is okay. So what I'm doing is I'm saying when the $button, that is when the button is clicked, call fn1. Okay. So let's see if this works. If I click on this, you can see that the first division got faded out. If I click back, the first division comes back. So the same functionality was accessed using the click method, and we did not have to declare the event over here. That is, we did not have to say on click over here. This is the JavaScript way, but in jQuery you can see that we have methods that handle the same thing, and this makes it cleaner because all the events are handled in the jQuery coding part itself. Okay. So now there is one more method that I want to talk about, which is the document.ready method or the ready event. So let me just first write it down. So I'm going to say $document. So I'm selecting the entire document object, and I'm going to say .ready, semicolon for the method ending. And inside this ready, what we're going to say is we're going to say function, because when we're calling the ready method, basically this ready method is called when the entire HTML document is loaded. Okay. So after that we want something to happen, right? And whenever we want some action to happen, we call a function. So we say function, opening and closing round brackets of the function, opening and closing curly braces of the function, and whatever code we write, we should be writing inside this. So this is a general habit or a general convention being followed, that any code that you want to call for jQuery should be inside this ready function. And the reason is because obviously you want all the functions, all the jQuery functionality to work only after your entire document is loaded onto the website, right? So this ready function puts a restriction, that is, this button click will not be called until and unless your website is loaded. Now right now our website is very lightweight because it doesn't have a lot of components, but in real world scenarios sometimes websites are very heavy, right? So there are a lot of elements on a website, so it takes some time depending upon your internet speed whether your document is loaded or not. So let's say your website is very large and only a button is loaded, and on that button click you want something to be hidden, but that document or the entire part of the document still is not loaded. So you don't want your button to work in that case, right? So until and unless the entire document is loaded, only after that you want the functionality of the button to work. So this ready method helps us achieve that, and all this code will be used or activated only when the entire document is loaded. So that's the actual functionality of this ready method. So from now onwards, as we move ahead, we are going to be writing all our jQuery code inside this ready event or ready method. Okay, so this was a little bit introduction on events in jQuery. So as I mentioned, events in jQuery are handled differently compared to JavaScript. Basically, we have the same set of events, but in jQuery we have inbuilt methods to handle those events. Okay, so instead of writing on click over here and specifying a JavaScript function, what we did is we called a equivalent click method, and this click will only affect the button because we are using the element selector. You can also give the button an ID btn1, and you can say #btn1 and it will still work, but it will work only for this specific button. If we have some other button with some other ID, the click method will not work for that. So let me just copy paste this and change the button ID to btn2. If I click on this, so this is click me 2. If I click on this, nothing will happen. You can see fade toggling is not happening. But if I click on the first one, the first division gets faded. So this click method only works for btn1 because we are passing the ID of this btn or button. So similar to click event, let's see one more event which is double click. So you have to say dbl click. Okay. So now single click won't work, but if you double click on it, the fade toggling is happening. So if I click once, it's not working. But if I click 2 times, you can see the toggling is happening. So this is double click event. Now similar to on mouse over and on mouse out, what we have in JavaScript, we've seen that 2 events in the animation of JavaScript video, right? So similar to that, what we have over here is mouse enter and mouse exit. Okay. By the way, this ready event is called when the entire document is loaded. So that's why everything is inside this ready function or ready method basically. So these method and events are same. Okay. So when I'm talking about events in jQuery, they have their corresponding predefined methods. Okay. So this ready method is equal to ready event, and it is called only when the entire document is loaded. So that's why we are calling document.ready, and when the document is ready, we want to do something. So we have an anonymous function over here without a name, and the body of that function is over here. And inside this, we are doing all our jQuery coding. So yeah, coming back to another inbuilt event, which is mouse enter and mouse exit. Okay. So if I say mouse enter, this corresponds to, or it is equal to, on mouse over in the JavaScript that we had, right? So if I just scroll on this btn1 now, you can see the first paragraph or the first entire division faded out. So if I'm hovering out again, fade toggling is happening. If I hover again, the first division comes back. So what I can do is I can say fade out over here on mouse enter, and similar to on mouse enter, we have mouse leave, and here I can say I'll call fn2. I'll just copy paste this entire function fn1 and rename it as fn2, and here I'm gonna say fade in. Okay. So when I hover, mouse enter is called, but I'm leaving it again immediately, right? So that's why it's fade toggling. That is, it is fading out and fading in. In fact, let me just copy these 2 buttons and paste it on top. Now if I hover, mouse enter is called, so that's why it is faded out. If I come outside this button, fade in is called because mouse leave event is called, right? Now we can do this in one single event, which is known as hover. So what I can say is, let me just use another button. So here what I'll do is, I'll say btn2, and here I can say hover. So hover takes 2 arguments, that is 2 functions basically. So hover combines enter as well as leave. So you have to say what happens when mouse enters. So I'm going to say fn1, comma, and I have to say what happens when mouse leaves. So this is combining mouse enter and mouse leave in one single event, that is hover event. So if I hover on click 2, mouse enter is called. If I hover out, mouse leave is called, that is fn2 is called. Okay. And this is for btn2, that is the second button. We have the body tag, we have h2, we have paragraph, we have 2 buttons, then we have 3 divisions with their respective IDs and 1 class. We also have a CSS file, external CSS file, which basically gives this border and the red color to these paragraphs. Then we have unordered list, which is inside this 3rd division. Then we have another unordered list, which is inside this division, that is the 4th division. It does not have any ID and class. So that's about it. You can just pause the video, just type out this code if you haven't already. And then below the body, we have the script tag, which loads the jQuery. So the jQuery library or the entire file is inside this JS folder. So this is that jQuery file. And below that, we have one more script tag, which has the document.ready function or ready method. That is, this event is fired when the entire document is loaded. And all the jQuery code we type inside this event or method. Okay, so let's see the first effect, that is the hide and show effect. So there are 2 effects. So on the click me button, that is click me 1 button, we'll try to hide this paragraph, that is the first paragraph. And on the click me 2 button, we'll try to reveal it. Okay. So we have their respective IDs. btn1 is for first button, btn2 is for the second. So let's use the selector. I'm going to say $ID selector. So I'm going to say hash btn1. I'm going to say .click. So So the events are handled separately or differently in jQuery. We've seen that in the previous couple of videos. And on click we want something to happen, so that something can be done in a function. So I'm going to say function, opening and closing brackets of that function, opening and closing curly braces of that function, and hit enter. So this function doesn't have a name, it is an anonymous function which exists only inside this click method. So inside this click, what we want is we want to hide this entire paragraph. So we have the paragraph ID, that is first div, that is this entire division we want to hide, not the paragraph actually. So the first div ID is first div, so I'm gonna say $first div first. Make sure you don't make any spelling mistakes. I'm gonna say dot hide. Okay, and that's about it. That will completely hide this entire paragraph. Let's click on this button and you can see that the first division is completely hidden. Now the same thing we want on click me to, that is the paragraph should be revealed, and then for that we have the show method or show effect. If I just copy paste this entire thing, change the button 1 ID to btn2, and instead of hide we have show. Okay, so if I click on click me 1, the first paragraph or the first division is hidden. If I click on click me 2, the first division comes back. Okay, so this was hide and show. Now we also have one single function or one single method or one single effect that does both hide and show, which is known as toggle. Okay, so let's create third button. Let's name it toggle. Let's give it an ID of btn3, and let's just copy this entire thing, paste it over here. Let's say btn3, and here if I say toggle, what this effect or method, so effects in jQuery are implemented by inbuilt methods itself, so they are the one and the same thing. So if I click on this toggle, what will happen is, if the first div, so we are toggling the first div, right? So if the first div is visible, it will be hidden. If it is invisible, it will be shown. So basically it is doing hide and show depending upon whether the division or the element that is selected is visible or not. So if I click on toggle, right now it is visible, right? So it will hide it. If I click back again, it will show it. Okay, so these were the first three effects. The next three are fade in, fade out, and fade toggle. Actually we've already seen them, so let's quickly do this. I'm gonna say fade out over here. So on click 1 we can fade this out. On click 2 what we'll do is we'll say fade in. So if I click on fade out, so it's faded out, that is the first division is faded out. If I click on this button, it will come back. And then we have fade toggle as well. So if I say fade toggle, if I click on it, if the first division is visible, it will become invisible in a proper transition. If I click back, it will come back. Now we can give timings also inside this. So usually we have two parameters in effects. The first one is the time. So you can have slow. So the fading will happen slowly. You can have fast. So the fading will happen fast. Or you can actually give some milliseconds. So if I say 2000, so this is 2000 milliseconds, that is 2 seconds. So it will take 2 seconds to fade this entire division. So if I click on it, you can see it is fading very slowly. Now the second parameter is known as a callback. Okay, so what this callback is a secondary function which will be called after the complete fade out is happened. So we'll talk about callback in next video and we'll discuss it in detail. Right now we'll just concentrate on these basic effects. Same thing applies to fade in also and fade toggle also. So these are the next three effects. So first three were hide, show, and toggle. Next three were fade out, fade in, and fade toggle. And then we also have slide up, slide down, and slide toggle. So let's actually do slide up. So if I click on this, you can see that the entire division got folded up, right? So we have slide down also. So let me click on this. So you can see we got slide up. If I click on it, it comes back in a sliding fashion, slides down. And then we have slide toggle which does the both things. So if I click on this, slide up will happen if the division is already visible. If I click back, it will slide down depending upon whether the division is visible or not. And this can happen to any element. Okay, right now we are just applying this on the first division. It can be applied on unordered list, it can be applied on paragraphs, on buttons, on images, and anything on any element which is visible on the web page. So depending upon what you select, this style is applied. Today we are going to be taking a look at the animate effect, and what it does is provides us custom ways in which you can apply CSS in an animation kind of way. So let's see how this animate effect works. So this code is from the previous video itself. We have our body, we have 3 buttons you can see over here. Click me 1, click me 2 and animate. Then we have a paragraph, then we have 3 multiple divisions with different classes and IDs, okay? And the classes have been styled over here, so we have a separate style sheet, style.css, and the border and margin is coming from this myDivs class, which is applied to these 3 different divisions, okay? So this is something that we've done in the previous video also. And coming down, we have the jQuery, which is in the JS folder, so you can see over here jQuery.js. So we are loading the jQuery over here, and then we have one more script tag inside which we have the document.ready event or method, inside which we will type all the jQuery code. So now what we're going to be doing is we'll create another division. So let's create one more division. I'm going to say div. I'm going to give it a class of my cube, okay? Inside that, let's add a paragraph saying this is a cube, or let's just only type cube, okay? Let's use this class, go to the styles, let's style this. What we'll do is we'll give it a height and width. So I'm going to say width of 100 pixel, height of 100 pixel. I'm going to give it a background color of blue violet. So you can see that we have our cube over here, okay? Let's reduce the opacity to 0.4. So you can see it has become a little bit faint. And I'm also going to say position is equal to absolute, because what we're going to do is we're going to be animating this cube, and what we want to do is in the animation we want to perform some multiple CSS animations. So I'll tell you how it works. Right now let's just style this. So our cube is completely styled over here. Let's add a little bit of padding, that's about it. And let's give the size as 50 and 50, okay? So this is our completely styled division. Now what we want to do is we want to perform our custom animation. So we've seen the predefined animation effects in the previous video, that is the fade in, fade out, slide up, slide down, hide, and those toggle functions and toggle effects. But what if we want to do some custom styling, okay? So let's say you want to perform multiple things. For example, let's say you want to scale this cube, that is you want to increase the height and width by 100 pixels. You also want to shift this cube from this position to the left by 100 pixels. You want to change the opacity from 0.5 to 1. And so on, you know. So all these 3 things you need to do together simultaneously, and you want to do it in an animation way, okay? And you want to do it on the click of this button. So let's first create the click event. I'm going to say $. I'm going to use the ID of this button. Let's see what the ID is. The ID is btn3. So I'm going to copy paste this, use the hash selector, that is the ID selector. I'm going to say .click. That's how events are done in jQuery. Inside this you want to create an anonymous function. So I'm going to say function, opening and closing round brackets of the function, opening and closing curly braces of the function. Hit enter. Now you can create a separate function outside and call it inside this click method, but you can also do this anonymous kind of way. Now here you want something to happen, right? So this is the button 3 click, that is the animate click. Let's first see if this works. I'm going to hit alert. If I click on animate, you can see it is working. So here you want to access this division. So let's give it an ID of cube, okay? So we'll again use the $. Selector. I'm going to say $, and inside this I'm going to pass cube, and we're going to say animate, okay? Now this animate again takes 3 parameters. The first parameter is the set of CSS things that you want to change, and you have to do that in curly braces. The second parameter is the time. So I'm going to say 1000 milliseconds. And the third parameter is callback, which is not mandatory. So we'll talk about callback in next video, because that is something that I want to keep it separate. Let's just first focus on this animate method as of now. So what are the set of parameters that you want to change? That you have to give in this opening and closing curly braces. So let's just hit enter. So I said we want to move this division, that is this cube, from left to right. And that is the reason why I made the position as absolute, because then you can manipulate the positions. So I'm going to say left colon, I'm going to say 150 pixels, okay? And that has to be done in single quotes. I'm going to say 150 pixel in px. And if this is the only CSS you want to manipulate, this is all about it that you have to type. So let's test this first. Let's click on animate. and you can see our cube moved in an animated way from left to right by 150 pixels. So this is how the animate effect works. It did not happen abruptly, but it happened in a fluidic slow motion in a proper animation, right? So the entire division shifted 150 pixels to the right from the left. What if you want to add more things? So as I mentioned, we want to change the opacity. So just give a comma, hit enter and type in opacity colon. Again in the single quotes, type in the number that you want to achieve. So opacity ranges from 0 to 1. So right now the opacity in the styles is given as 0.4. We want to reach 1, right? So I'll hit 1. Similarly, we also want to change the width. I'm going to set the width to 100 pixels. I'm going to hit comma. I'm going to say height colon 100 pixels, because currently the width and height is 50 pixels, right? So the height and width will also increase. And that's about it. All these 4 different CSS things, that is the CSS styles, will be applied to this cube in an animated way to this division, that is. So let's see how this works. Now if I click on animate, you can see the size of the cube, that is the size of the division, increased. The opacity was changed from 0.4 to 1, and the entire division also shifted 150 pixels. So you can see multiple CSS styles were applied to this division to give it a custom effect. And then you can also change the time. So if I change this to 3000, things will happen very slowly. It will take 3 seconds for this entire division to shift. It will take 3 seconds for the width and height to change. So if I click on animate, you can see things are going very slowly. Now you can also say slow. You can also say fast, or you can also give a proper millisecond timing. Okay, and if you don't give anything, it will go in a predefined timing. So the duration and callback parameters are not mandatory. Only these CSS parameters are compulsory, because that is something that you want to change, right? So as you can see, this is the code that we've been using in the past couple of videos for the effects part. So we have a button which I have named as toggle. Then we have a division with ID first div and class my divs. Inside that we have 2 paragraphs, and we have one more div with the same class and ID as second div. Then we have loaded the jQuery over here, and we have one more script tag inside which we have document.ready method, that is that event. And whatever jQuery we will type it over here inside that ready function or ready method. We also have a separate style sheet which is styling this division, which is giving this blue border and the red color to the paragraph. You can change this to something else also. Okay, so I did it dark cyan and so on and so forth. So this is something that we've done. Let's see what is this callback. Okay, now let's say you want to perform fade toggling of this division. Okay, so let's select that division. I'm going to say $. I'm going to use the selector. We already know what is selector. I'm going to use the ID of the first division. I'm going to say hash because it is an ID selector. I'm going to say dot fade toggle. Okay, and this has to happen on the click event, right? On the click of this button. So let's first do that. So the button ID is btn toggle. So again I'm going to say $. I'm going to say dot. Okay, I forgot to add the hash, so I'm going to say dot click. Inside the click method we have to create an anonymous function. I'm going to say function, opening and closing round brackets of the function, opening and closing curly braces of the body of that function, and inside this I'm going to copy and paste this entire thing. Okay, so whenever I click this, you can see it is fading out and fading in. Now we also know that we can pass the timing. So if I pass 3000, it will take 3 seconds to fade out the complete paragraph, right? So if I click on this, you can see it is slowly fading out and it takes 3 seconds. Now what if you want to add a message that the entire division is faded out after you call this fade toggle method? Okay, that is this effect. So here I'm going to say alert division is faded. Okay, so after you call this fade toggle, you're calling an alert method which is saying division is faded. Let's give this a higher number. Let's give it 5000 milliseconds. So it will take 5 seconds for this entire division to be faded, right? Now if I click on this toggle, you can see even before this entire division is faded, the alert box has already come, right? So you can see that what happened is typically what happens, the jQuery code runs line by line, right? But in effects what happens is, even when the effect is not completed, the line next to the effect is already executed because it is not properly chained, or because it is not used as a callback. So what a callback does is, a callback is basically you telling that call something only after the effect is done. Okay, so if you say comma over here, you can create a callback function. So to create that, you can again create anonymous function. So I'm going to say function, opening and closing round brackets of the function, opening and closing curly braces of the body of that function, and here I can do that alert. So now what has happened is, first the fade toggle will happen and it will take 5 seconds for the entire division to fade out, and only after that this callback function will be called, and this callback function is having this alert method. So the alert method will be called only after 5 seconds. So if I click on this, it will take 5 seconds for this to completely fade out, and only then this pop-up is shown, that is this alert method is called, because it is a callback function. Okay, now again if I click on this, it will first fade in, it will take 5 seconds, and only then the pop-up alert box will be coming. So now it is properly synchronized, right? So this is what the callback does. So callback method is typically used when you are doing effects and when you want some functionality to occur only after the complete effect is done. Okay, so this is callback, and it is possible pretty much with all the effects in jQuery. So if you are using slide down, so even then, or let's do slide toggle, and in the method alert I'll say slide toggling done. Okay, so let's give this a smaller time, 3000 milliseconds. So the first parameter is the time duration in which the animation should happen, that is the effect should happen, and the second parameter is the callback. Okay, so you can completely remove this and this will still work. Okay, but if you just have an alert over here, it will be called before the toggling has happened. So if I click on toggle, immediately the alert box will be shown and the slide toggle will happen afterwards. You don't want that to happen, right? So that's why you give the callback. So you just put a comma over here and put that callback function over here. So another way what you can do is you can create another function. Let's say print msg. Inside that you can call that alert. You can say effect done, and along with the milliseconds, the second argument is the callback, right? So all the effects have this feature, that is first parameter is the time and duration in milliseconds, or you can have slow and fast, and then the second parameter is usually the callback function. So here you can pass print message. Okay, so if I just pass this, even this will work. So if I click on it, you can see first the slide toggling is happening and then the message is done. Effect shown is called because this function is called. So either you can do an anonymous function over here without the name, or you can create a separate function and pass the name of that function over here. So this was callback. Let's see what is chaining. So in chaining, what you can do is you can perform multiple effects one after the another. So what if you want to perform slide up and slide down? So what I can do is, on the click of this button, what I want is, I want slide up first. That part, I want slide up first. So I'm gonna say slide up, and instead of again copy pasting this and putting it on the new line, I want and other part and saying slide down. So this is one and the same thing. Okay, so if I click on this, first slide up is happening, then slide down is happening, right? Let's give it a duration of 2000 so that it happens slowly. So if I click on this button, first slide up is happening, then slide down is happening. So instead of doing this in two lines, what you can do is you can put this on one single line. So first slide up, then you can put a dot operator in between, and then you can say slide down. So you can see first slide up is happening, then slide down is happening. And you can also add one more thing over here. Let's say fade out 1000 seconds, and again you can say fade in, let's say 3000 milliseconds. So all these four things will happen one by one, starting from the left to right. So they are just separated by dot, but you're doing it in one single line rather than using the selector over and over again. So if I click on this, first slide up, then slide down, then fade out, then fade in. So you can see four things happen in one single line. So this is chaining effects. Okay, you're chaining one effect after another by using the dot operator, and you're doing it in one single line. Now we are going to be moving to jQuery DOM manipulations. So just like how we were manipulating DOM objects, that is the HTML elements in plain JavaScript, we can also do that in jQuery, and of course we are going to be doing it by inbuilt functions and inbuilt methods which are provided in jQuery. So that's the entire trend that's going on currently in the jQuery tutorials, that we are using some inbuilt methods which are pre-provided by us by the jQuery library, and that makes things very easy. Okay, so as you can see on the screen, I have a little bit of code already written. This is our body. We have a heading tag. We have a button which is named as action. Then we have a division with id div1 and class mydivs. So this class gives it this border and this green color. So if you go to the CSS, you can see the border is given 2 pixel blue, and then we have a color of dark cyan. You can change this. In fact, let me just cut this out. We don't need any color. Let's keep it black. Okay, so we have a paragraph. We have word paragraph as a little bit bold compared to other things by using the b tag. Then we have our script which is loading the jQuery library. So jQuery.js, which is inside this JS folder. So pretty much something which we've been doing in the previous couple of videos, just that the little bit HTML code is changed. So in this video, we are going to be taking a look at these 4 inbuilt methods which are used to perform DOM manipulations. The first one is text method, HTML method, ATTR, that is attribute method, and CSS method. Okay. So let's see how you can manipulate the DOM elements with these 4 different inbuilt methods. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to try to access this text inside this paragraph using the text or HTML method. So there is a slight variation between the two, but pretty much both of them do the same thing. So let's see how it works. So inside the document.ready, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create the click method or click event for this button using the id btn1 of that button. So I'm going to say dot click. Inside that I'm going to create anonymous function and opening and closing round brackets of the function, opening and closing curly braces of the function. Inside this, let's first try to use the text method. Okay, so I'm going to use the alert method. I'm going to say alert. Inside that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say $. So I'm going to use the selector and I'm going to select the paragraph. Okay, so since there is only one single paragraph, I can directly select the entire element. If you have multiple paragraphs, you can give an ID. So let's give it an ID. In fact, I'm going to say ID equals to P1. Okay, so here I'm going to say hash P1, of course in single or double quotes. And now what I'm going to say is I'm going to say text. Okay, so in the alert, I'm just selecting this paragraph, that is selecting this element with ID P1, and only paragraph has this ID P1. And you know that there is some text inside this paragraph, so I'm using the text method to directly access it. So let's see if this works. I'm going to click on the button and there you go. You can see we got the pop-up. This is third paragraph in second division, which is what the text is, even though it is not the third paragraph and not the second division. This is just some random text, but we got our text in the alert box. Okay, so instead of alert, what you could have done is you can also use a JavaScript variable. I can say var txt is equal to use this entire thing, right? And then you can also alert it out to see if the text variable now holds the text value. So let's see if this works. If I click on action, you can see it is working. So this is getting the text which is already there on the screen or on the web page. What if you want to change that text? So in this case, the same method is going to be used. However, here what happens is the text that you want to change has to be passed as an argument inside the text method. So that's the only thing that is different compared to getting and setting. So right now what we did is we took the value which is already there in the paragraph. So that is getting the value or getter method or get method basically. And when you're setting something, that is you're passing a new value, you have to pass it as an argument. So what I can do is here, I don't need the LHS because we are not fetching the value. We are setting new value, right? So I'm going to say $P1. I'm going to use the selector. I'm going to call the same method text. But now I'm going to say hello world. And now if I click the button, you can see the text got changed. So I'm using the same method but in a different way, because when I'm passing arguments, it is acting as a setter method, and when I'm using it without anything, it is acting as a getter method. Okay, so right now if I click, nothing is going to happen because we need something to hold this text. So we need a variable or you need an alert method to pop it up. So that's why nothing is happening. Now in the same way, the HTML method also works, but the HTML is slightly different. Okay, so let's see first what the text method is giving. So you can see the entire text is given back. Now let's replace this text method with the HTML method. So I'm going to say HTML over here. And now if I click on action, you can see along with the text we also got the HTML tag which was there inside the paragraph tag. So anything inside this paragraph tag which is in HTML tag, so let's say if I say I tag over here and if I pass this second inside, okay, so this becomes italic. Okay, so now if I click on action, you can see this I tag is also shown. So this is the only difference between the HTML method and the text method. So when you're using text method, only the entire text is written back and any HTML inside that text is excluded. But when you use the HTML method, the HTML tags in the text are also being returned. Okay, so that's the only difference. So let's say I want to set this text and not pop it up. So what I can do is I can say $p1.html. Inside this in double quotes, I can pass this entire text and I can say this is first paragraph in first division. Okay. So when I'm setting the text, again, if I want to pass some HTML elements or HTML tags in the text, I have to use the HTML method. So if I click on action, you can see this is the first and then paragraph was bolded because we passed it as an argument and in the first division. So this text is, I made a mistake in the text. So this again first text is in italic. Now if I would have changed this HTML to text, what would have happened is if I click on action, you can see the entire tag is also being put as a plain text in the paragraph, right? So we don't want that. So make sure you know the difference between the HTML and the text method. There is only a slight difference. Okay, so now let's move on to the ATTR or attribute method. Now many times our tags in the HTML have some attributes. So the attributes are these green values, right? So in this division, you can see we have ID attribute, we have class attribute. So let's say you want to know what is the value of this attribute. Okay, so let's say in the P tag, we have this ID, right? So ID is P1. So let's say there is one more attribute. Let's say I have given it a value of hello world. Okay, so this is the attribute name and the value of that attribute is hello world, right? So I want to know the value of this attribute whose name is value. Okay, so don't confuse, this is the name and this is the actual value. So what I can do is I can call the selector. I can select this paragraph using the ID selector and I can say ATTR. Inside this I will pass the name of the attribute. So the name of the attribute is value. So if I pass this, hit semicolon, and if I try to alert this out, so let's say alert, let's see what we get. So there you go, you can see we got the value of the attribute whose name is value. In fact, you know what, since it sounds confusing, let's change this to class P1 class. Okay, so now I'm passing this attribute class over here and the value of that class is P1 class, right? So when I click on action, I'm getting P1 class. So the value of this attribute class is P1 class, which is what is being printed over here. So this is what this attribute method does. If you want to fetch the attribute, you can use this. And lastly, we have the CSS method. So again, CSS method is used to fetch the CSS of the HTML elements. So again, let me just copy this entire line, comment it out, and I'll paste it over here. We have to use the CSS method. Now in CSS method, we have to pass what exactly do you want to know about this P1 tag. Okay, so this paragraph has some text in it, right? So let's say what you want to know, the color of the text. So I pass color over here. If I click action, you can see I'm getting the RGB 000, which stands for black. I can also say font family. So the font family for the paragraph is going to be printed. If I click action, you can see Times New Roman is the font family. Similarly, I can also ask for font size and it should be 14 pixel, I guess, 14 or 16. Yeah, 16 pixel, right? So this is how you can access the CSS styles of a particular element on the HTML. So you can do this for division also. So if I access this division, I can ask for what is the border of this division 1. So we know the border is blue, right? So I'm asking for the border, and if I click on action, you can see it is 2 pixels solid, and then we have the RGB color. So this color corresponds to blue. Okay, so that's how you can access the different CSS attributes or CSS styles of different HTML elements on the document. So let's start off with the coding. I hope you watched the previous video. So we have two buttons with two different button IDs, set value and get value over here. We have a division, we have a paragraph with their respective IDs and classes. And here what we'll do is first we'll just alert attribute of this paragraph. So let me just quickly write the code. I'm going to say alert. Inside the alert box, okay, so this has to happen on the click method, okay. So the click method of the button, right? So let's do that on get value. So I'm going to say dollar opening and closing hash btn2. So this is the selector. So we are using the ID selector to select the button whose ID is btn2, and we're going to say click. Inside this I'm going to create an anonymous function. Here I'm going to say alert, and in the alert I'm again going to select the paragraph with the ID p1. Okay, so that's the ID of this paragraph. I'm going to say .attr, and the attribute that you are looking for is the name of the class. Okay, so this is the name of the attribute, that is class, and the value of that attribute class is p1 class, right? So that's what we are trying to fetch over here, and if I click on get value, you can see we get p1 class. So this is something that we saw, but I did not show you how to change this, right? So in order to change this, let me just comment this out. You have to use the same syntax. You have to select the paragraph, you have to call the attribute, but now what you want to do is you want to add a comma and add one more argument, which is going to be the value. Okay, so I'm going to say p2 class. Okay, so this is the value of the attribute named class. So this is name and this is value. So this is sort of like a name value pair. Similarly, here what you're doing is we are saying change the attribute value to p2 class, and the name of that attribute is going to be class. Okay, so if I click on this, and let's do this on set value. Okay, so I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to replace the btn2 to btn1. So let's click on set value, and let me just comment this over here and uncomment this. So on set we are changing the value. If I click on it, let's see the value has changed or not. It has to be p2 class now. So let's click on get value, and there you go. Now the value has changed, right? So this is how you can also change the value using the attribute method or attr method, which we did not cover in the first part. Now similar to this, we can also go around and work around with the css method. So let's see how the css method works. So I'm going to just copy this entire line, paste it over here. I'm going to call the css method because we have selected the same paragraph, and what we want is the font name, okay, or its font family, right? So let's click on get value, and you can see the font family is Times New Roman. Now you can change this by again the same syntax. So let's go to btn1. Let's copy this entire thing. Let's paste it over here. Let's change the attr to css, and now we'll change the font family, or in fact let's change the font size for simplicity. Let's do it to 25 pixel. Okay, and here what we'll do is we'll retrieve that same thing. I'm going to say font size, and let's see if this works. So if I click on set value, you can see immediately the size of the paragraph text has increased to 25 pixel. And if I see, and if I want to confirm it, if I click on get value, there you go, you can see 25 pixel. So this was the two things that was left out. I showed how to fetch the values using the attr and css, but not how to actually set values. So we did the set value over here in this video. So this completes the 4 methods. In the next video, we'll perform some more DOM manipulations. So these DOM manipulations were working on the text inside the different HTML elements, right? So this can be applied to some other elements also who has some text inside. So it can work with anchor tag, it can work with division. Right now we were just manipulating everything for a particular paragraph, right? So this can pretty much work for divisions also, can work for anchor tags and anything which has some text inside. So what if you want to actually manipulate the entire element itself? So for that we have some other functions and other methods. So that we'll see in the next video. So as you can see on the screen, we have a little bit of code already written. You can pause the video and type it out, but this is something which we've been doing in the previous couple of videos also. We have the body, we have 4 or 5, 6 different buttons with 6 different names: append, after, prepend, before, remove and empty, which are basically the jQuery inbuilt methods which are going to be helping us performing DOM manipulations. So a little bit theory about them is written over here. We have a division, we have a paragraph with its respective ID and class. We also have an external CSS file which is giving the styling to this division with a border of 2 pixels and then a little bit of margin and padding. Lastly, we also have our jQuery.js file being loaded over here at the end of the HTML document after the body. And then we have our script tag inside which we have ready method or ready function, inside which we will be writing the jQuery code. Okay, so these are the 6 methods that are going to be performing different DOM manipulations. So let's start off with the first one, that is the append method. So the append method inserts content at the end of the selected items, okay, or elements. So what this helps us achieve is, let's say you want to add a little bit of text after a particular element on the HTML document. So let's say you want to add one more paragraph after this paragraph, or you want to add one more paragraph after this division. So depending upon where exactly you want to add it, you'll be using the append method and you'll be selecting that particular element. So let's do the append method first. So we have to first use the click event of this button. So you have to access that button, right? So let's do that. I'm gonna say $. Inside this, I'm gonna pass the ID of the button, which is btn1. So this is the ID and I'm using the ID selector, so I have to use the hash. I'm gonna say .click, that's the click event, and inside this I'm gonna say function, opening and closing round brackets of the function, opening and closing curly braces of the function. Here what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna select this division, okay. So the division ID is div1, so let's select that. So I'm gonna use the selector again. Here I'm gonna say div1 because that's the division ID, and I'm gonna say append, okay. So what I want to append is another paragraph, so I just have to write the paragraph as a parameter over here. So I'm gonna say p, close the p tag, and I'm gonna say this is second para. By the way, this is the first one, so let me change that. Okay, so I'm gonna say this is second para in first division, and let's see how this works. Okay, I'm gonna click on append over here, and there you go. You can see the paragraph was added inside the division, but it is at the end. So that's what append does. Append inserts content at the end of the selected element. So which element did we select? We selected the division, right? So the paragraph or whatever thing that we are wanting to add was added inside the division at the end. So now let's see what the after method would do. Let me just read it out. Inserts content after the selected element. So what we'll do is we'll quickly copy this entire click event and we'll just change the button ID to 2 because the after button ID is btn2. So we'll access its click event, and now what we'll do is we'll just change this to after. Okay, now let's see what is the difference. First I'm going to click on append, and you can see the paragraph was added inside the division. So now I'm going to click on after, and now you can see that the paragraph was added, but it was added outside the division. So that is what is the difference between append and after. So after inserts the content after the selected element, and append inserts the content whatever we want to insert at the end of the selected element. So that's the very important difference that you need to know. Now let's see prepend and before. Okay, so what I'm going to do is again copy this entire code, paste it over here, and change the button ID to 3. So the button ID 3 is for prepend, right? So let's change the code also. So I'm going to say prepend over here. Now let's see how prepend works. So when I click on prepend, the paragraph got added inside the division, but it got added at the very first, that is before this initial paragraph. So what prepend does is it inserts content at the beginning of the selected element rather than at the end of the selected element. Okay, so that's the difference between prepend and append. And similar to that we have before. So let me just copy this entire code again. Let's just change the ID to btn4, which is for before. So I'm gonna change the code over here to before. Okay, now let's click on before. Let's first click on prepend. So prepend adds content to the selected element but at the very start. So it adds inside that same element, and when I click on before, you can see that the paragraph got added before that entire division because we selected the division and we said before. So the content was added before that division, so on top of it at the very beginning. So just to actually give you all differences between all the four, let me just refresh this. Append is adding the content inside that same element which is selected but at the very end. Prepend is adding the same content in the same selected element but at the very start. After is adding content after the selected element, and before is adding content before the selected element. So pretty much makes sense, right? So these 4 things are done. Let's see how you can remove all this. Okay, so now this is adding some content, adding some HTML elements using jQuery methods. But what if you want to remove them? You can also do that by 2 methods, which are remove and empty. Okay, so let's see how these work. I'm gonna copy again the code for this, paste it 2 times, and change the IDs to btn5 and btn6. So btn5 is remove. Okay, let me just add a comment over here. This is for remove and this is for empty. So remove, as the name suggests, removes the entire element which is selected. Okay, so what I can do is I can just call remove over here. I don't need to pass any parameters. We are not actually changing anything. We are completely removing it out, right? So now what it will happen is when I click on remove, this entire division will be removed because we've selected the division. If I click, you can see the entire division being gone, right? Similar to that, we have empty, but what empty does is empty removes the content inside the selected element. So let me just change the code over here. I'm going to say empty. Now if I click on empty, the division is going to be there because we've selected the division, but whatever inside the division is there is going to be cleared out. So if I click on this, the paragraph or whatever content was there, it got removed out, but you can see the border is left out, which means that the division is still there. Okay, so that's the difference between remove and empty. Now a little bit of variation that you can do with remove is you can pass in parameters, as in you can pass in some specific content that you want to remove. Okay, so let me just copy and paste this over here. And what I'm trying to say is, let's say you want to remove a particular paragraph which has a particular class. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll just copy this and paste it over here, and I'm going to give it an ID of 2, and I'm going to change the class as P2 class. Okay, you don't need any kind of value. I'm going to say this is second paragraph in the first division. Okay, so now what you want to do is you want to remove only this second paragraph. So obviously you cannot use empty, right? Empty will completely remove everything inside the division, and if you remove the entire division will be gone. So you want to specifically remove only one particular paragraph. So coming down to the code, what you can do is, instead of using the division ID, what you can do is you can select the paragraph, but you want to remove only one particular paragraph, right? So you can pass the ID of the paragraph. So you can say hash p2, and now if I click on remove, you can see that particular paragraph was removed. Okay, so this is something that you can do. These are certain variations that you can perform with the remove method. Also, you can also pass multiple IDs or multiple paragraphs. So what you can do is, let's say you want to remove both the paragraphs. Let's say you have multiple paragraphs, but you want to only remove these 2. So these 2 have unique IDs, right? So I can pass 2 IDs. So I can say comma, I can say hash p1. And now what will happen is, if I click on remove, both these paragraphs will be removed because both these IDs of both paragraphs have been passed over here. So if I click on remove, you can see both the paragraphs got removed. Similarly, you can also pass their classes. So the class is p1 class and p2 class using the dot operator. So I can say dot p1 class, and here I can say dot p2 class, and it will work the same, and it will remove all the paragraphs because we've selected the paragraphs, but the ID of the paragraph should be this or this. So if I click on remove, you can see both the paragraphs are removed. So this is one variation that you can do with the remove method. Now let's talk about some methods which are particularly coming in for CSS. So as you can see on the screen, we have 4 different buttons which perform 4 different methods. The first one is going to be add class. So as the name suggests, it adds one or more classes to the selected elements. Now what is this class? So this class is nothing related to any object oriented concepts. Okay, so don't confuse with that. When we are talking about front-end scripting, especially HTML and CSS, classes are something which we define in the style.css or separately, which has some CSS styling. So when you want to apply this in a dynamic way using jQuery, you can use the add class method. Similarly, when you want to remove that class, you can use the remove class. And when you want to perform both, depending upon what is done, you can use toggle class. So if a class is already applied, you can remove it. If it's not applied, you can apply it. Okay. And lastly, we have the CSS method. We've seen this CSS method in the first video and the second part also, but we'll take a look at it again over here just for a revision purpose. But let's start off with the first add class. So what I want to do is, when I click on add class, I want to add a particular class to this entire division. which means I want to add a little bit of more styling. Okay, so this has to be dynamic in nature only when I click on this button. So let's first access the button click. We'll use the dollar selector. I'm going to say hash btn1, that's the ID of the first button. I'm going to say click. Inside that I'm going to say function, opening and closing round brackets of the function, opening and closing curly braces of the function. And inside this I'm again going to access the division. So division ID is division1. So just paste it over here. I'm going to say add class. Okay, now which class you want to apply is something that you have to pass in double quotes over here. So let's go to the style.css. In the style.css you can see I've already created 3 different classes. The first is myDivs, which is already applied, right? You can see we already have this class applied to the first division. It is not there applied to the second division. So you can see there is one more new div class. So let's try to apply this. So the way we go about applying this is you just need to copy this class name, okay, without the dot. You don't need the dot operator over here, and just paste it over here. So that's about it. So let's see what the class has. The class has a border radius of 10 pixel. So right now you can see we have square borders, right? So this border radius gives it a circular look, and the background color will change to aqua color. So that's something that should happen when we click on add class. So let's see if this works. So when I click on add class, there you go, you can see our class has been applied. The border has become curved and the background has become aqua color. Now similar to add class, we have remove class. So just copying this and pasting it and just changing the button ID to btn2, and here I'm gonna say remove class and removing that same class. So first I'm gonna add class. If I click on remove class, that class got removed. Okay, makes sense, pretty simple. Let's move ahead. The next one is toggle class. So just copying this again and pasting it, changing the button ID to btn3. Here I'm gonna say toggle class. So when I click on toggle class, if the class is applied, it will be removed. If it is not applied, it will be applied. Okay, let's just click on toggle class. Let's click it again. Click it again. So you can see toggling is happening. So one more thing that I forgot to mention is you can pass multiple classes also. So in the style you can see we have one more class which is new para class. So if I copy this, if I hit space over here and pass it over here, and if I click on add class, you can see that the new para class also got applied. In the new para class, what we had is we had the font weight as bold and the color was brown. So the paragraph which is inside this division, now we've selected the division, but it can be applied to pretty much any element, right? So it can be applied to paragraph or section or anything which has some content in it, and the styling will be applied to it. So this new para class is applied to this division. So anything inside this division will now become bold and will now have this color. So if I add one more paragraph inside this, let me just copy this and paste it over here. Let's say this paragraph doesn't have any ID also, but still it is inside this division div1, right? So now if I add class, it gets applied to the second paragraph also, because we've selected the division and not the paragraph. When I click on remove class, the new div class is removed, but we are not removing the new para class. So the color remains the same and the bold attribute also remains the same. So if I want to remove that also, I just have to hit space over here and pass that add class, remove class. So you can see it's working. Similarly, it works the same with toggle class. You can have multiple classes just by giving spaces between them, and that's how it's done. So lastly, we have the CSS method. So the CSS method can be used to add one particular or few particular CSS attributes to a particular element, or retrieve what exactly is the CSS styling of that particular element. So let's do that. Let's copy this. Let's paste it over here. Let's just change the ID of btn4. btn4 is the ID of the CSS button. Now here what I'm going to do is I'm going to say CSS, and let's say you want to find out some CSS property. So this is we fetching the property. So I'm going to say alert. Inside that alert, I'm going to pass this entire thing. And the property that we want to find out is what is the padding. Okay. So if I click on CSS, you can see the padding is 10 pixel. And if you go to the styles, you can see the padding was 10 pixel, which was added to all the divisions. So we've selected the division. So that's why we're getting the padding, right? if we go and say font size, and if I click on CSS, you'll get the 16 pixel, which is standard font size of these paragraphs, which is inside this division. Now this is when we want to fetch something. So what if you want to set something, that is you want to change the font size. So I'm just gonna cut this or copy this, and when you want to change the font size, you just have to pass one more parameter using the comma, and you have to give, let's say, 20 pixel semicolon, and when I click on CSS, you can see the size of the paragraph has increased. So this is something that we saw in the previous videos also, so let's not spend a lot of time on the CSS method. We've seen this already. And yeah, this was something which is related to DOM manipulations when it comes to classes, when you want to dynamically or manually apply classes or remove classes or toggle classes. So this will help you apply some styling on demand to your HTML documents depending upon particular events. So you can also change the events. You can apply something on hover, on mouse enter, on mouse exit and whatnot, so that can be done. Right now we're just doing it on click, but you get the point, right? You can add a lot of dynamic features, a lot of dynamic styling depending upon some events based on some inbuilt jQuery methods.